Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of 286 Project with me, Chris Akers. And on this podcast, we talk about arts, culture, politics, sport, and anything else worth talking about. Now, today's guest, and I did check this up before we started, we've actually known each other for 7 years.
What?
Yes, 7 years. I know. I had to check the first time we contacted each other is 7 years ago.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
Time
yeah,
is flying now. Wow, and
absolutely.
and we met each other online, the way it's the scary way you're not supposed to meet people.
I know, yeah. Hi, ladies and gentlemen, it's Keri Smith. How are you doing, Keri?
I'm good. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm very well. I'm very well. Now, the reason I first got to know you was because of an article you wrote on Medium called Why I Left the Left.
Yes.
And I remember we talked after that, and then you sent me, well, you asked for my address, which I thought was a bit odd, but then you sent me a book, and it was Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules of Life.
Yes.
Yeah. And that was I knew of Peterson before that, but it was that book was just a revelation to me in many ways. Some of it, a lot of his common sense, but it was sure was an eye opener as well. Um, and going back to the article you wrote for Medium, you were one of the first, I think the first person I saw that had written an article like that. Since then, I've become a dime a dozen with articles and videos saying why you left the left.
Yeah.
Um, but you were, I think, the first person I knew that wrote an article about that. So before we get to that article, just what were your beliefs beforehand?
Yes. Well, sorry, I'm still a little stunned. It's been 7 years. Okay. 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 I was just trying to conceptualize time. Like, yeah, my beliefs. So I was squarely in the social justice cult. And at the time, that article was called On Leaving the SJW Left or the SJW Cult and Finding Myself. And now a lot of people colloquially use the word woke. That's become the most popular word to describe the ideology I was referring to, but I still use the phrase social justice to be very specific about what I mean because woke is also becoming somewhat overused now as well to mean things that are not social justice, and I think that's a mistake. But yeah, my beliefs were what is colloquially known as woke, or social justice ideology, and I was in that world for about 20 years. And I preached it, I pushed it, I believed in it, I was a true believer. I believed it was really about liberalism and progressivism, and I thought it was about ending bigotry and ending racism and sexism, all the things that the people in it claim it's about. And leaving it was a very hard thing to do psychologically and also just in the real world, like figuring out how to leave my career and things like that. It was a hard thing to do, but I became compelled to tell people why I thought it was bad and try and wake up people who were still in that cult, people who were my friends and stuff. So when I wrote that essay, that was me sort of coming out as a wrong thinker, knowing I was going to be likely unfriended by lots of people and trying to reach them anyway and trying to explain to them the very scary things about our belief system that I had started to see for the past 6 months to a year. And so that was why I wrote that. And then, yeah, since then I started my own podcast, Deprogrammed, like leaving a cult, because I'm still trying to reach people who are in that world and explain to them what's happening. As you mentioned, there have been, there's the stories of leaving the left are now a dime a dozen, which is a great thing because that means a lot of people are leaving. But there's still so many people who are in it. And
Yeah.
I encounter these people all the time, and some of them are capable of understanding what's dangerous about it and leaving it. And so those are the people I focus on.
So obviously you talked about you left the left. Was it an instant thing or was it something where you saw it at first, but you were like almost stubborn because you were so set in your beliefs? Was there a particular, because I know you were like in the comedy world as well, so you must have seen it all around, but was there a particular moment where you thought, I can't deny this anymore. This is just nuts.
Yeah, it was, I was definitely stubborn, and as I mentioned, it's hard to leave it. You don't just leave overnight because you don't get into a cult quickly. You get into it slowly by degrees, and you leave it by degrees as well. You leave it slowly. So the first few things, and I've talked about this quite a bit, the things that woke me up, because there are some people who are trying to figure out how do we wake people up on a large scale. Like I did an interview with Peter Boghossian where I think he's brilliant, and he was asking me these questions because he's trying to figure out how to help wake people up on a large scale. And for me, it was seeing several things in rapid succession. There were always little things that would stand out to me that I would kind of file away and not know what to make of it. For example, I saw mobbings all the time in my world. I saw people cancel culture, and I remember one of the first ones I saw that I disagreed with was when they all went after Fit Mom. The Fit Mom was a her name is Maria Kang, and she's a mom of some toddlers, and she does these free exercise programs for moms on how to exercise with your children. And she had done a promotional video or poster for the stuff that she does, and it was a picture of her looking really fit and beautiful with her three kids. And it said, "What's your excuse?" Me work out and value my health and fitness, right? Well, the people in my world, the woke world, the social justice world, especially the feminist part of that world, they just flipped out. They said she was body shaming and fat shaming. They started mobbing her, as what's become very familiar to people now. Back then, it was mostly happening in these little echo chambers, but they completely piled on her. It made it to national news. It made it to morning shows and stuff. This question of, was she body shaming? Was she doing something bad? And I remember I didn't agree with any of that. I didn't think that it was right to jump on her, and I thought it was crazy actually, but I didn't say anything because I was too afraid, because I knew, even if you don't think about it consciously when you're in it, you know that you'll be next. It's not worth saying anything. So I was a coward. And there were several moments like that where something would happen. I didn't agree with it, but I would stay quiet. And I would just think, I guess I would kind of think, well, that's just a bug. That's an anomaly. That's not a feature of the belief system. That's just a bug, which isn't true. I now know that's not true. It is a feature of the belief system. It is a puritanical, authoritarian belief system, and they will come for you and try to punish you and make an example of you if you don't speak the tenets of the belief system and purely. And but what woke me up eventually, it wasn't those little things. It was during the 2016 presidential campaign and election season. Everything in woke in my the echo chamber I'd been in for 20 years, it got heightened, and it became undeniable. And there were three things in particular that hit me in rapid succession. And one was seeing the shooting in Dallas, Texas, of we're at a Black Lives Matter rally where a sniper killed several police officers. And the people in my social justice or woke echo chamber, they sort of celebrated that. And that shocked me, that there was this tacit endorsement of it, that sort of, oh, well, some old white men are going to have to die, that kind of attitude. People were saying things like that. And I didn't recognize this. I was thinking, wait, this is murder. Like, what are we talking about? That's not liberalism. I believe in the non-aggression principle. Like, what are you talking about? Killing people. So that happened. And then I also saw, maybe one of the biggest things that impacted me was, I thought, just like all the people in my world, I thought Trump was, oh my goodness, he's a demagogue. He's a Hitler point two, 2.0. He's all these things. I didn't know anything about him, actually. I never really watched any of his speeches. Every opinion I had was from what my echo chamber told me to think. And so, I saw everything out of context and telling me how to think about it, right? And then I went down a rabbit hole on YouTube. I stumbled on a video somehow of these people on my side, these leftists, attacking a Trump supporter outside of a Trump rally. And it was a mob of people, and they were egging this girl. They were throwing eggs at her. And she ran and was like trying to get back inside the building. And it shocked me, and it rocked me in my core. it made me cry because I was like, these aren't, I'm not like these people. These people aren't, why are the people on my side doing this? And then that video led me to another video where they were chasing down a Trump supporter outside of a Trump rally and throwing bricks at him. They bloodied him. And it was video after video of this kind of violence on my side against Trump supporters. And so that just emotionally wrecked me. And I think now trying to look on the outside of it, looking back at it, it was the foundation of my belief system was shattered at that moment because I think it really, I came away from watching all those videos thinking, I, maybe I don't know what's happening in the world. Maybe
Mm,
I'm wrong about things
yeah.
because I thought Trump supporters were violent. You know, I'd been fed this belief. And so, but then I started thinking, well, what have I actually seen that shows that? And so I started trying to find similar videos of Trump supporters mobbing and attacking Clinton people outside of Clinton rallies, and I couldn't find it.
Mm,
And and that shook me to my core. Now, I didn't leave the ideology the next day or anything. That was just the thing that got the ball rolling where I started thinking about things. I started investigating things. I started noticing just increased calls for violence. When Trump won, I was devastated. I cried like a bunch of these leftist videos
yeah.
you see. I thought it was terrible. And so I started trying to figure out why he won. And every time I would take the time to post what I thought was a nuanced thought about it or trying to share different references and show my world, my echo chamber. Hey, if we don't want him to win again, we need to figure out why he won. And so like listen to this video, listen to what these people are saying, you know, and all I was met with was of course the mobbing, the cancel culture stuff of like, no, Keri, it's just sexism and racism. That's the only reason he won. And you know, there was free speech wasn't allowed. Having freedom of thought wasn't allowed. And so it just kept spiraling from there. Of like I started to notice more and more that social justice and woke, my belief system was actually a liberal, not liberal. It was illiberal. They're in favor of censorship, censoring people, stifling free thought, stifling free speech. Um, you know, in favor of violence against people who disagree with you. These are not liberal things. And and very racist. It took me so long to realize how racist it is and how sexist it is.
Mm,
And it's the exact opposite of everything it claims to be. And so once I had that understanding, I started to realize this. I still was afraid. I knew I was going to have to leave my career because I had built a career working in comedy, representing comedians who were in the same belief system as me, and and preached this belief system in their comedy. And I was very proud of that because I thought we were changing the world. And it was like I'm going to have to leave my whole career
yeah.
and lose a bunch of these people that at the time I thought of as friends. And so that was a long process, you know.
Yeah, indeed. How, I mean, obviously, as you said in the beginning, like the word woke is used a lot, but what would be your definition of it?
So woke, I use it interchangeably with social justice. I use it to mean social justice ideology. And so for me, woke or social justice means it's a belief system that says the best way to look at the world is as a competition for power among identity groups.
Mm,
And every identity group that you look at, it can be labeled as an oppressor or an oppressed group. And they also use the words privileged or marginalized group.
mm,
And in order to reach equality or equity, they love the concept of equity. We have to redistribute power among these identity groups. And it's sort of a mutated kind of Marxism. Marxism was about redistributing wealth among class groups, but woke is about redistributing power among identity groups. And so in order to do that, it requires us to judge and treat people differently based on which of these identity groups they're in. And so because they think we have to do this in order to reach equity, some magical utopia in the future, we have to use racism in order to end racism. They believe this. We have to use sexism in order to end sexism. They believe this. And the way they get people to do it is they redefine words. One of the first things, just like a cult, one of the first things you learn when you get pulled into the social justice or the woke cult is that the definitions you've always known, we've always agreed on for racism is wrong. And that's not really racism. That racism is prejudice plus power. That's how you turn well-meaning young people who are against racism. That's how you turn them into racists, is you tell them this kind of racial prejudice is what they call it, racial prejudice. It's not racism though, because you're aiming it at a group that has power. So it can't be racist. And they say the same thing about sexism. Like they say it's impossible to be sexist towards men. So you can have as many um, prejudiced opinions as you want about men as a group, and you can treat them differently and discriminate against them in a sexist way, but they don't call it sexism because men have power as a group. That's how it's evil what they
Yeah.
do. They turn people into these foot soldiers for the things they think they're fighting.
What if the man's homeless and the woman spouting that is a CEO of a high flying company? Because would they still use
Yes,
gender? See, that's
they would.
that's just weird.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah,
They would say the homeless guy is an oppressor and he has more power than her, even though he's homeless and she is a powerful CEO. They really believe this. They don't live in the real world. They
that's
don't
just
live in the real world at all. That's why it's hard to have conversations with them unless you really know how they think about things, so you can know how to speak the same language they do in order to try and take apart their belief system.
yeah. You just mentioned it there. Isn't language one of the tools they use to actually spread this system far and wide? Even something as simple as, I don't know, you sometimes see on social media where someone famous dies and they say, people say rest in peace and they say rest in power because it's all about the power. I imagine language is one of the tools they use to actually spread their message far and wide.
Oh, yes. Well, you just hit on something really important, Chris, which is power. They say rest in power when someone dies because that's what they value and they worship. Power is at the center of their ideology, is what they think needs to be redistributed. Um, and they do use language. Any cult uses language. Any con artist or grifter or basically a bad actor manipulates language in order to manipulate thought, in order to manipulate people. C.S. Lewis has written about this. George Orwell has written about this. Solzhenitsyn has written about this. This is throughout human history. There's always been this personality type that takes advantage of and cons people and uses people, manipulates people. It's a dark personality type. And dark ideologies do the same thing. And in order to control people, you have to control how they think. And how do you control how they think? You start with controlling their language. And so they do that. They redefine existing words like racism, sexism, woman,
Mm.
harm, violence. They try and redefine all these words. And once they can rewire your brain and program you to think differently about these words, they can then manipulate you and control the way you think better. And it's no different than if you look at any cult like Heaven's Gate. They had new words that they came up with. The social justice woke people do that too. They don't they don't just redefine old words. They come up with new phrases. They come up with things like toxic masculinity and cisgender and heteropatriarchy and
Uh,
white fragility. Like they coin these new phrases, um, like any cult would do.
yeah, it's just bizarre. I believe we're at a tipping point at the moment where more and more people are speaking out.
Mhm.
Has it surprised you it's taken you this long? Because I know there's fear, but even people I thought wouldn't be afraid, like a lot of famous people have who are a lot of rich and whatnot. I thought those would speak out more because what have they got left to lose? But they've seemed to have been quiet. Has it surprised you that it's taken this long for more and more people to speak out?
I don't know. It depends on the day. It actually surprises me more that it became so culturally dominant in the first place that it became the number one religion right now as woke, in my opinion. It's social justice. It's spoken by the political parties, it's spoken by corporations, it's spoken by all of the mainstream celebrities. So that's really surprising to me. Um, Once it became mainstream, has it surprised me that it's taking this long to fight it? I don't know. Sometimes it does, but other times I'm really proud of the people who are speaking against it and how much progress we've made. And I think you're right. We're in the middle of a turning point. It just seems slow going at the time, but there are more and more people speaking out every day. To your point though about famous people, here's what's interesting. There are a few famous people who don't give a shit anymore and they will speak against it. And
Mhm.
some of those are Ricky Gervais, some comedians like Ricky Gervais, John Cleese, Russell Brand. They're not afraid to criticize it now.
Mhm.
And that's great. But there are others who stay quiet, and it makes sense to me that they do, because we look at them and we say, oh, they have all this power, influence, money, fame. Why are they afraid? But that's exactly why they're afraid, because they have so much in their mind, they have so much to lose. They have such a high attachment on those things.
Mhm.
And you really have to get to a place of, like in my case, it took me 6 months to get over my fear and to speak. And I think a lot of that was because I was so afraid of the things that I was going to lose. And those things are real. Like when I always talk to people who agree with us, for example, who can see how dangerous this is but are afraid to speak, they'll tell me I'm afraid of losing my family's safety. I'm afraid of losing my job. I'm afraid of losing my friends, my social circle, all these things that are very real. But you have to get to a place, I think, where, and or at least this is what happened to me. I got to a place where I was more afraid of the consequences to my soul and to society if I didn't speak.
Yeah.
More afraid. And also, I came to a realization, it took a very long time, that none of the things that I lose if I speak and that I did lose are worth anything. Not really. Like, that's my opinion. I came to this understanding that, I mean, all that matters to me right now is saying is truth, is God. Like I do believe in God now. That's, I didn't back then. And and I think, there's this reference from the Bible where Paul, Paul used to persecute before he became a Christian in the Bible. He used to persecute and kill and murder Christians. And he had also built up this sort of prestige or something in the world beforehand, before he converted. And there's a verse in the Bible where he talks about letting go of all that stuff and how none of that stuff was worth anything. It wasn't worth it. It was all, he called it dung, I think, like poop. It's nothing, trash. And that's kind of what happened with me. It's like I gave up what? I gave up my career was one that people might look at and consider, oh, prestigious. Like you produce television shows. I produced a show with Chris Rock, for example. Oh, the world looks at that and is like, that's prestigious. Well, it's not actually worth anything if I can't speak what I believe to be true. Or, the money I was making. It's funny when some people who don't like what I'm saying call me a grifter now, because I I don't I was making good money preaching woke
Yeah.
through my career, representing comedians and producing television shows that had a woke message, and very good money. I gave all that up and I work gig jobs now.
Mhm.
Like I dog sit and I have a couple of other jobs I'm not going to mention, because even though they're gig jobs, I don't want to lose them if people hate me. Um, but that's, I don't care. I would rather make peanuts now, which I do, and be able to say what I believe to be true. It's there, you can't put a value on it. Like I can have this conversation with you and I don't have to fear all that stuff that keeps those celebrities quiet. It's
Mhm.
their fear of what they're going to lose. I don't have to fear that.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's nothing they can take away from me that means anything. And that freedom is amazing.
Yeah.
It's like I
Absolutely.
can say whatever I want. I can actually be free to think and to have conversations and not be constrained in some kind of prison of like, oh, but if I do that, I might lose XYZ. No, I'm not
Yeah.
afraid of that. So
Absolutely. talking about lost there, were there some things you lost at the time where you look back and you think, actually, I'm glad I lost that? And I'll give you an example. There may have been friendships that ended as a result of you basically going against your previous ideology. Looking back, obviously, a breakup of friendship is hurtful at the time, but looking back, do you think actually maybe that friendship bond wasn't as strong as I thought it was? So maybe that's the time to move on. If you understand what I mean, where there's some things where you thought, actually, I'm looking back, I'm glad I lost those because I'm a better
Oh,
person
yeah.
for it.
Oh, all of them. I mean, actually, there are some who I think are good people, but they're still in an evil ideology, my old ideology, which is evil. There are good people in it who are just misguided. And some of those friends, like, I think they're good people and I miss them. And I I hope they get out of it one day. But I would still rather it be this way. I would still rather them have unfriended me if they, and then there are ones who I don't think are good people who are in it. And I'm very glad it went this way because I don't want to be around them. What I learned, and that was most of the people who unfriended, most of them. It's like I joke about this a lot, but I say SJWs or woke people, they don't have friends, they have allies. They talk about allies a lot. And you learn that if you are in that world and then you leave that world, you will learn that, that they'll all turn on you. I had one friend, I thought we were good friends. She's a feminist media critic and she I mean, we did sleepovers together. We would go get our nails done together. It wasn't just a business relationship. We were also friends. But she publicly denounced me just because I was asking questions and trying to get to the heart of why Trump won and stuff and speaking about what I thought was wrong with our ideology. That was a no-no. So she publicly denounced me and said had I was her feminist friend who had become a red-pilled right-wing alt-right troll, is what she called me. So there was some of that and I'm glad it happened.
Yeah.
Like, I don't value those kind of relationships anymore. So it's sort of we have limited time in life,
Mhm.
and I wanna fill that time with good-hearted people, and so you if you are though maybe it sounds this way because 'cause I'm so far on this side of it. For if anybody's listening and they're in that place of being afraid of speaking and what they're gonna lose, I know how that feels at the time and how scary it is, and also how sad it is if friends unfriend you or whatever. But I promise you, on the other side of it, it's going to open up opportunities for you. You're going to meet better people. It's going to open up space and time for other people that you don't even know yet.
Yeah.
Like you, when I first left the woke cult, we met because I was online and I was looking for other people like yourself who were questioning and talking about these things and who were open-minded and you're one of those people and you know, I I connected with you. I even though you're in another country and we met online, it was like,
Yeah.
I dig this dude. I think I would want to be friends with him. And so I've made lots of friends that way since then, you know.
Well, that was the interesting thing when I go back to how long we've known each other, because when we started, I mentioned, I think it was through DMs through Twitter. What surprised me was the openness, because, like you say, there's almost a fear sometimes of saying that. But I was open towards you, saying, I like this article. And then we started dialogue, and then I think we had a few Zoom chats together and whatnot.
We
And there
did.
seemed to be a real openness about it, which, I mean, I'm an open book. I'll speak to anyone. I don't care. But I know for a lot of people, I think, especially in this day and age where there's an epidemic of loneliness anyway, it's hard for people to reach out sometimes. And I think that's one thing that has happened is just the connections you make with people who you can disagree with them and you know they're not going to walk out. They can be from any background and you find your commonalities. This whole, what I call diversity is a strength. I was saying to a friend of mine the other day that to me, it doesn't quite make sense. Like if you're connecting with a friend, you connect through your commonalities. You don't connect through your differences. Same if you're in a relationship. If I'm meeting a woman, I think, oh, she's attractive, I want to ask her out. It's through our commonalities that we'll connect. It's not through our differences. Our
Yeah.
differences, if anything, will just pull us apart. And I do think one benefit has been the people you connect with, like yourself, is being very open, very honest, and very how can I put it? Very nuanced as well. I mean, would you agree that one of the problems is the lack of nuanced conversation? And actually both sides of the aisle now, not just woke or anti woke, it's just both sides of the aisle. There seems to
Oh,
be
yeah,
very little lack of nuance.
absolutely. And I'll, you know, I know, I think you're very similar in that I I immediately, when I left the woke world, I recognized tribalism as one of the problems in that world and an echo chamber and stuff. And so I've been from the beginning of leaving, like I don't want to just get in another echo chamber or try a tribe. And um so I don't really, I'm not one of these people who jumps from tribe to tribe like I think some of the grifters do, where it's sort of like oh, I'm a woke Democrat. Oh, now I'm a conservative Republican. Oh, now I'm a libertarian. Oh, now I'm an ANCAP. Like where they're just constantly moving around. And I don't I haven't really identified, I even hate that word, as anything since leaving the woke world except Christian. I became a believer, which is which is how I view the world. Like I don't think people can function without a belief system. And I think Christianity is is the belief system. I think it is the best one. I think it's the correct one. I don't know, that's gonna probably offend some people, um but in terms of politics and stuff, yeah, there's a lack of nuance. There's a lot of people who just sort of, and they're not all grifters. Some are just, it's human nature to be tribal. And so people just kind of gravitate towards different groups like, oh, I'm in this group now. And uh, I don't, I'm a little nervous about that. Like I never joined the Republican Party. I'm an independent. I've been an independent since leaving the left. And I do vote for Republicans now, but I'll also vote for, I voted for Tulsi Gabbard, who's a Democrat. I'll vote for libertarians. I'll vote for whoever I think is the best candidate. Lately, that's in the US, that seems to be a lot of times here in Texas, it seems to be the Republicans. Um, but yeah, I want to stay away from tribal allegiance, put it that way. My allegiance is to God and then my husband, and that's it.
So how did you get from moving away from what we used to call social justice warrior ideology to Christianity? Because again, when we first met, obviously we got on really well, but I know it was a few years before you moved on to that. So what basically what was that journey? What got you to that point?
Well, around the same time that I was questioning and leaving social justice and woke, I also became just obsessed is a good word with with the idea of like wondering if there's a God or not, because I had always been very prejudiced. I had always been very prejudiced against Christians in particular for the whole 20 years I was in the woke world. And I did what a lot of people do. I kind of like looked down my nose at believers and looked down my nose at the concept of God, which I kind of find funny now. That sort of that human arrogance of like, I know everything and I know there's no God. Like, and I got to this point where I was questioning everything. And I think now, again, on the outside looking back, it makes sense because I was losing my belief system and my way of viewing the world. And I think humans need a belief system. I don't
Mhm.
think we can function without one. And a lot of people who are atheists, some people who are atheists claim they don't have a system of belief, but I would argue if you think you don't, just look at your behavior and see if you can evaluate it like an outsider would and figure out what you believe. For example, during the COVID years, there were a lot of people who I think behaved as if what they worship is the state, the government, or if what they worship is supposed scientific consensus, or if what they worship is big pharma. Like there are people who worship big pharma. And so anyway, let me that aside, sorry to go on a tangent. I started just wondering about, are we just physical bodies with a computer brain, or do we have a soul? I started reading a lot and watching a lot of videos from scientists about string theory and consciousness and stuff. I was trying to figure it out. I was a science major. I was a biological anthropology and anatomy major, and um, you know, I had sort of written off faith. And then I was coming across these stories of scientists who had started off as atheists and become believers, and I was reading their stories, and I just started opening myself to the possibility of God. And I went to a church service when I still lived in Los Angeles. I went to sort of a non-denominational big church there that's run by Michael Bernard Beckwith. He's sort of a new age guy. He's friends with Oprah. It's like this huge, it's called Agape. It's a huge spiritual center in Los Angeles. And I went there and I had my very first service. I had an experience that I think was God touching me. And I know how that sounds to non-believers. I know it means they immediately put me in a weirdo box. That's okay. I had this experience I couldn't explain any other way. And so I wanted to keep figuring out what was that, and I kept going. And over a period of several years, I was still thinking about these things. I was reading all kinds of philosophy and spirituality and new age stuff and Christian stuff. And I went to all different kinds of churches. Once I moved to Texas, I went to a Catholic church for a while. I went to a cowboy church where here in Texas they have cowboy churches where the preacher's up on a horse in the rodeo stadium. Those are kind of funny. If you ever visit Texas, Chris, I'm taking you. We're gonna go to the cowboy church, and I'll take you to shoot guns. We'll do all the Texas stuff if you ever get to come visit. I promise. Barbecue, all of it. But yeah, so I just kind of was following wherever I felt like God was leading me, and I ended up at Christianity. My At the beginning, my idea of God was very broad and open, and it was sort of like what people I would call the universe, like, oh, the universe is teaching me a lesson, or the universe, a lot of people, and when people use that phrase now with me, I think I know what they're talking about. We're talking about the same thing. And over time it became more narrowly focused on Christianity, God as described in the Bible. And I don't know if I'm answering this well. If you have specific questions that can help draw out what you want from me, but
No, I understand it because when I've seen you, obviously when I spoke to you before, I mean, you really takes Christianity seriously because you even got baptized. Is that
I did
correct?
get baptized. Yeah. I
Yeah.
got baptized right before I got married because, look, there've been so many changes since I left woke. I mean, I quit drinking. I'm an
Mm,
alcoholic. After I left woke, it took me a couple more years, but I quit drinking. I quit dating. Um, I had been dating for a couple years there. Um, just someone not good for me.
yeah.
And I got out of that relationship, which was hard. I um I met my husband. Uh Before we got married, I really, like you said, I took it seriously, and I wanted to take my marriage vows seriously. And I wanted to make these vows that mean something in front of God and my family. And so before I did that, I got baptized because I wanted to make my vow to God. And it's very symbolic. It's a ritual that I think is important. It's You're taking off the old self, you're putting on the new self. I've done lots of things I regret in my life, made lots of mistakes. As a Christian, I would, to use Christian language, I've sinned a lot. And I really believe like God wipes all of that clean. And that going through that ceremony of baptism is really symbolic, and it cements that for you in the way you think about it, taking off the old self, putting on the new. And there are lots of like my behavior's changed a lot. The things that, sometimes people call me a conservative now. I'm like, well, it depends on some policy things. Yes, I guess I have a conservative position. Other policy things, I have a liberal position. On the arts and stuff, I tend to have a liberal position. On individual rights, very liberal. And also, I but on a personal level, in terms of the way I think I should behave in the world, what I think is moral and immoral for me to do, to live, the ways for me to live, that's changed a lot. And I have become very conservative in the way that I view the best way to be in the world, right? Like all these things that people just kind of, I don't know, when they don't have God, they just kind of write these things off. Or maybe even if they think they have God, but they still write these things off, these things, these ways of behaving, like they don't think twice about telling a lie. Or, I was like that. And now God changed me. Like I do think hard about the choices I make. And I still mess up and I still sin, but but I can go to God at the end of the day in prayer, and I can take stock of the day, and I can ask forgiveness for anything that I think would disappoint God, and I can also thank him for all the blessings, and I can um just grow in that faith with him. I'm very aware as I'm talking, I'm very aware of how this is going to sound to someone that doesn't believe. So I
No,
apologize
I
if
mean, it's understandable. It's definitely understandable. In
yeah.
fact, I remember one episode I did, and we was actually talking about race relations, but one of the things we discussed is the studies that show if you're religious, then it improves your mental health. And this is what I was going to ask you is, has it, with your, as a strength of your faith, because we talked about fear earlier, but as a strength of your faith, basically help get rid of the fear of speaking out? Did it like strengthen that resolve, saying, God's behind me. I'm going to speak out no matter what.
Yes.
Mm.
It's improved my mental health. It helped me get sober. I don't have any uh issues with, like, I mean, we all have depression is something, or feeling down or having moods. That's normal. People go through ups and downs. But I don't have these long bouts with like depression or anxiety like I used to have in my old life. um it, my old self, I don't have that. And even the things that, like, fear of public speaking or anxiety about that, things like that, I'm getting over those. I've been getting over those I do much better. I used to be terrified to do podcasts before I started podcasting, and now I don't really think about it very much, but I still have a fear of public speaking, but I do it. I'm going to be moderating at another event here in Texas in April. I do it whenever people ask me, because I know the more I do it, the more I'll get over it. And God helps me get over that. Like before any speaking event, I'll pray, take my ego out of this. Help me just say words that are pleasing to you, and make it not about me, but about what words are pleasing to you. And that sort of relieves that. I think a lot of anxiety sometimes is based in the ego of, like, how are people going to perceive me? And am I going to sound smart? Am I going to do a good job? That kind of thing. And it sort of just relieves that. And um, even if you're not a believer, I think you could understand how that helps. Like I had a atheist tell me once, well, it's not really God who's doing that. It's just, psychologically it helps you do public speaking because it's a psychological trick you're playing on yourself. I'm like, okay, whatever. The point is it works. If that's what you think, okay. I actually think God is helping me, but even if you don't, I'm being helped. So it's a positive thing. And I don't go through, I see a lot of my friends who, some of them are some of them don't believe, but they want to believe. They've expressed a desire to believe, and ask how to pray and stuff like that. Like, how do you pray if you don't believe? And sometimes I see those friends share online and stuff. They tend to go through more of those depressed periods, that I don't really go through anymore. And I think that is because they don't have that faith that who sits on the throne, who is the beginning and the end, the alpha and the omega. Like, how the story ends, and that there's a creator who loves us. Like, they don't have that. And if I didn't have that, the state of the world this woke stuff, how it's infected everything, I would be super depressed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But super depressed, but no, I'm not. So I don't know. I think God has a sense of humor, and he helps me to see the funniness and all this crap. every day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I mean, we've talked off air. I've said about I've been going to church over the last few months and so on and so forth. But one of the things I've noticed, even before I started doing that, was those without religion were almost aimless, regardless of what I thought of it at the time. There seemed to be, because I had no grounding, if that makes sense. And so there
yes,
was almost this aimlessness. And I think that's one of the things that's caused me to look at religion more, because I was noticing people who had strong religion, especially, they at least had that grounding and at least had that sense of that base of, right, these are my beliefs and I'm not shaking from them.
yeah,
And they seem to be less affected from what's happening in the world, or what's happened in the world over the last 10 years.
yes, I think so because you have a purpose that's not your purpose. It's God's purpose. It's not like it's something bigger than you. And you have this moral code that's not your moral code, that's bigger than you. And you if you were your own God, like I knew this one atheist for a while. Now I know a lot of great atheists, but I also know some terrible humans who are atheists. Just like I know a lot of great Christians and I know some terrible humans who claim to be Christian. But anyway, this one atheist who I think is a terrible human. He he to me, looking at him and trying to understand him, he told me he worships reason. He agreed that we all worship something. He told me he worships reason, okay? But he worships his own ability to reason, which means he worships himself. So if he can reason his way out of something or into something, then it's okay. And I saw that happen in real time. I saw him do things I never thought he was capable of and lie, cheat, steal, do all kinds of things and justify it because he reasoned out why it was okay to do. And this isn't just him. I mean, I would say humans do this. We can rationalize anything. I've caught myself trying to rationalize things. And but the beauty, one of the beauties of Christianity, of God, is that God stops me because I'm not allowed to rationalize something that he says is wrong.
Mm.
So lying, for example, God will stop me, like, and that's not me. That's me trying to hold myself to his standard and what his commandments and what he is, the way he has said I'm supposed to live. I've got a funny story I've told before about this to illustrate this. Do you want me to tell you the story?
Yeah, yeah, go on, tell me.
Okay. Okay. So one of my gig jobs involved me driving a van. And you may have heard that women are not good drivers. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Anyway, I'm not saying if that's true or not, but I am a professional driver. However, anyway, so in this job, I was supposed to take the van and vacuum it at this car wash, but I didn't realize it, long story short, I didn't realize I was in the wrong place. And I was at this gas station that had here in America that had one of these car washes you can drive it automatic car wash you can drive your vehicle through and it washes it. And I kept reading the instructions from my boss, and I was like, "Does he really want me to drive it in there? It looks kind of small." And I'm like, "I guess so." So I drove the van into this car wash. It was too big for the car wash, and I got stuck, and I had to floor the gas to get out of there. And it scraped the top of the van off
Oh,
and
goodness.
broke the top of the car wash. A big old piece fell off, and it was terrible. I got on the other side, and I was looking at the damage, like, I can't believe I just did this. I just destroyed the top of this van and the car wash. And I called my boss and told him what happened. Of course, he wasn't happy at all. I ended up having to pay for that, of course, pay for the van to be repaired. But for a second, Chris, and this is after I was a believer. I was a pretty new believer. I was looking around the car wash and the gas station is like one of these big chains, right? And I didn't see any cameras, and for a second, I was justifying my brain did that human thing. It was like, "Oh, this is a big national chain gas station. I bet they have insurance. I bet they can fix the car wash without me having to pay for it." I started to get back in the van to leave, like, to not take responsibility for that. And humans can justify things like that. And the old me probably would have. I would have just left. but God stopped me. And it's hard to explain, but it was like, I knew that God would know that I did that and he would be disappointed in me. It's like like I would know that God knew and God would know that I knew he knew
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah,
be
yeah,
funny.
yeah, yeah.
So I had to get out of the van and go into into the gas station and tell them, "Hey, I just Burger Car Wash. Here's my information." You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't have done that without God. That's not holding myself to some, and if you are a non-believer and you tell me that you're gonna hold yourself to some standard like that, bullshit. Because you're creating the standard, you're your own God. So, you have to hold yourself to something outside of yourself that are not your rules. I firmly believe that. And if you survey the various belief systems available, woke was my old one. Woke is terrible. It does give a moral code. It's a terrible moral code. It tells you to judge and treat people differently on the basis of race and sex and to discriminate against people. And it's just, there's terrible morality in that belief system. Christianity is the basics. It's like, I think when you start learning about Christianity, you start reading it. And anyway, I did. And you're like, this is like common sense. I know it in my core. I know it in my soul, in my bones. It's like, don't lie, you know, like things
Yeah.
like that. But people ignore these things all the time unless you take it seriously. So anyway, it's kind of a ramble, but hopefully that funny story will illustrate what I mean.
No, I completely get it. And I'm just wondering, I interviewed a few years ago because I used to write for a boxing website, but I interviewed someone who had a reputation for honesty, and he talked about, and he's a Christian as well, but he talked about how one of the reasons he's honest was because he didn't want to have to give submission in many respects. In other words, if he tells a lie or if he just does something which he doesn't believe in, that's a submission to him. And that does sit well with him. Is that the same with you in terms of your belief now, in that you feel that God gives you the strength to not submit to what's happening in the world if you truly believe it's wrong, no matter what the cost?
I don't know if I would describe it that way, but yeah, I mean, I agree. You're I believe everyone worships something, everyone has some kind of belief system, and everyone submits to something. Everyone's a slave to something. Some people in this modern culture, humans are slaves to um, technology, their phone, social status, alcohol, gambling. Some people are slaves to porn addiction. People are slaves to consumerism. Their physical appearance, like vanity, whatever, all kinds of things. And I want to be a slave to God. Like I want to submit to God and make that primary. Some people are slaves to relationships. Some people are slaves to their spouse or their kids. And I think that's when they get the order wrong. I mean, the order should be God, your spouse, your kids, and then you. People get that messed up and then they have problems. And so, so, so yeah. I think I think I see what that guy is saying.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about at the beginning about why you left the left. I know you don't belong to tribes, but how do you think the right have dealt with what's going on over the last decade or so?
What do I think about what?
We talked about how you left the left, but in terms of how the right have dealt with all this, how do you think
Oh,
they've dealt with it? Have they become more tribal, or just how do you think they've dealt with it over the last decade?
I think that they're doing a good job. I mean, in some respects, like, I mean, an amazing job. Look at what Chris Rufo has done and James Lindsay, for example. Although I don't think James is technically a part of the right, but Chris Rufo, I think, calls himself. I mean, I think he's a conservative and politically and everything. And Rufo's, they've done a great job of making the word woke mainstream. Groups like Moms for Liberty have done a great job of talking about things like critical race theory and the grooming in schools and sexually explicit materials in kids' school libraries and I think they're doing I think they're doing a good job of of helping people understand the issues. But there are people on the right who, yeah, are just very tribal, and there are some conservative, I guess, conservative influencers or what have you that if I think a person is disingenuous or just in it for fame, money, or power, I don't want anything to do with them. I don't care how big their name is or their platform or whatever. I don't want to be associated with dark people. And
Mhm.
so there are people like that who I've encountered, and you know, I don't know. I'm not going to start naming people, but there's a few, you know, who I don't particularly follow or want anything to do with. And but for the most part, I mean, the people that I tend to truck with are people like you. I mean, it's hard to pin them down. It's hard to describe because they're individuals. The
Mhm.
people I tend to truck with are like the ones who I think are genuine, and they don't get so hung up on labels of what they are. And I really appreciate the work of people like Billboard Chris is amazing. Moms for Liberty. James Lindsay, who I mentioned, is just invaluable. Brett Weinstein, Peter Boghossian. These are some of the I think that the most important cultural influencers, to use that word right now. Libs of TikTok, Gays Against Groomers, these kind of these kind of organizations and these people, and I have a lot of respect for them. Oh, and artists like my friend, the famous artist Bertie Rose,
Mhm.
the people in the culture space like Geeks and Gamers and Friday Night Tights,
Yeah, yeah,
you know, all those guys at Comics Division, like they're they're doing amazing things. Eric July is making his own comic book. They're doing
yeah.
amazing things because they're pushing back in the realm of culture.
Mhm.
And that's where you change things and sway things. Politics will follow. And so all the ones pushing back in the cultural space, comedians like Chrissy Mayer, Gino Bisconti, like they're invaluable. I love these people.
Mhm.
I love them, and I've met a lot of them, and they have good hearts.
Yeah,
They're good people.
yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely. Kerry, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Before we end the interview, what's the future for you? Because obviously I can see in the background you've got your own podcast now. What else do you have planned?
well, yeah, people can find me on Deprogrammed with Keri Smith, and we're on YouTube. We're live streaming on Rumble now if you don't want to watch on YouTube. And I'm in the process of today even updating all of the Spotify and iTunes because I'm backlogged like a year. So it'll be updated there soon. I was doing that today and gonna finish doing that. What else are we working on? Oh, so my husband and I are renovating this old house.
Yeah.
We bought this house that was built in 1914, and it had been not abandoned. The city owned it, but nobody lived in it for like 30 or 40 years. And it's like the movie Money Pit with Tom Hanks. So we had to we had a team come in and fix the foundation. We put in heating and air. We've had electricians, plumbers come in, and then but in terms of the renovating work, like doing the floors, the walls, everything, like we've been doing as much of that ourselves as we can to save money. So this room, for example, my studio room, is brand new. I'm so excited. We spent the last 10 weeks working on it. I'm just proud. I'm like, we did this because when you're in the middle of it, it sucks. Every time we do another room, it's like, like I hate sheetrocking, the mudding and the sanding, and I do like the floors. We sanded the floors. I like staining and finishing the floors, and picking out the light fixtures, stuff like that, the chandelier, everything. Anyway, point being, now that the studio's done, I'm going to start doing more in-person conversations and interviews, and I'm really excited about that. And then we're bringing back book club, so we're reading Neil Shenvi's book Critical Dilemma this month, and then I'm working on a book this year.
Oh,
So
okay.
I know you've done that before, so I might ask for advice when I get
Okay.
stuck.
Actually, you just reminded me before we do go, I forgot to ask civility dinners because I know when I first met you, this was something you set up. Are you still doing those? And when is the next one?
I haven't done them. I've only done one since COVID, but I think I'm gonna be revamping and combining them with we're gonna do a deprogrammed meetup, and it's looking like we're gonna do the first one in April here in Texas. And so I think what I'll do is make it a joint civility dinner slash deprogram meetup. But people can find out more info. Just get in touch with me on any platform, Twitter, real Keri Smith, Keri, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, YouTube. If you want more information, I have a locals, all the places, all the things that people have. So
Uh, Excellent. Game, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I'll leave in the link a description, sorry, a link as to your YouTube channel and Deprogrammed and Rumble. Okay.
thank you.
Keri, it's been an absolute pleasure to you. I mean, all the best, and God bless you and
You
your
too. And one of these days we have to meet in person. Look, if I get last year, I got to go to Europe with my husband. He's a musician with all his shows, but we didn't come to the UK. If I come to the UK, I'm gonna make sure we see each other. But
yeah,
I think you should come to Texas.
yeah. I've never been outside of Europe, so it's definitely on my list. Texas, because Texas, especially compared to other states, seems very different. It seems a lot more my sort of thing. So yeah,
It's
definitely.
cool, big outdoor, expansive areas, and we'll get you a cowboy hat, it'd be fun.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, for sure, for sure. Again, thank you so much for coming. It's been an absolute pleasure. God bless to you and your husband.
Thank you, Chris.